In April 1922, a Wyoming oilman notices unmarked trucks hauling heavy drilling equipment toward a strange rock formation out in the empty hills. The rock is shaped almost exactly like a teapot, and no company has any legal business drilling anywhere near it. This is the true story of the Teapot Dome scandal, the biggest political corruption case in America before Watergate. It starts, of all places, with the United States Navy switching its ships from coal to oil. Around the time of the First World War, the Navy realized oil-burning ships were faster and far more efficient than coal. To guarantee fuel for wartime emergencies, the government set aside enormous oil reserves specifically for the Navy's future use. One reserve sat in Wyoming, beside that strange teapot-shaped rock. It was named, appropriately, Teapot Dome. Two more reserves sat in California, at Elk Hills and Buena Vista, holding oil worth an absolute fortune. These reserves were meant to be untouched, held in reserve strictly for national emergencies, not private profit. For years, that's exactly what they were: quiet, protected, and completely off-limits to private oil companies. Then, in 1921, a new president took office, and everything about these reserves was about to change. President Warren G. Harding appointed a longtime friend, Albert Fall, as his Secretary of the Interior. Fall was an old rancher and politician from New Mexico, ambitious and deeply in debt. Quietly, with the president's approval, control of the oil reserves was transferred away from the Navy and into Fall's own department. It was an unusual, barely noticed change, but it gave one single man enormous, almost unchecked power over the nation's oil. Fall soon began secret, closed-door meetings with two of the richest oilmen in America. One was Harry Sinclair, owner of Sinclair Oil. The other was Edward Doheny, a self-made oil tycoon and old personal friend. Both men wanted access to those protected reserves, and Fall, it turned out, was more than willing to listen. Behind closed doors, far from any public record, a very different kind of deal was quietly taking shape. Late one night, Edward Doheny's own son personally delivered a small black leather bag to Secretary Fall's home. Inside that bag sat $100,000 in cash, wrapped in plain paper, with no formal paperwork at all. Doheny would later insist it was simply a private loan between old friends, offered without a single written contract. Around the same time, Harry Sinclair began sending Fall an entirely different kind of gift. Bonds worth tens of thousands of dollars arrived quietly, deposited directly into Fall's personal bank accounts. Sinclair even sent a herd of purebred cattle out to Fall's struggling ranch in New Mexico, free of charge. Fall, who had owed back taxes on his ranch for nearly a decade, suddenly and mysteriously paid them off in full. His neighbors noticed the sudden new fences, the new livestock, the ranch quietly transforming almost overnight. Nobody quite understood where a government official's modest salary could possibly be funding all of this. The truth was, none of it was coming from his government salary at all. In April of 1922, without any public announcement or competitive bidding, Fall made his move. He secretly granted Harry Sinclair's company exclusive drilling rights to the entire Teapot Dome Reserve. Around the very same time, Edward Doheny quietly received the same kind of exclusive rights to the California reserves. On paper, both oilmen only had to build minor infrastructure in return, a pipeline here, a storage facility there. In reality, they had just been handed access to oil worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And almost nobody outside a tiny circle of men had any idea it had even happened. But out in Wyoming, ordinary oilmen noticed something strange happening near Teapot Dome almost immediately. Trucks bearing Sinclair's company logo kept rolling steadily up toward a reserve that was supposed to be completely off-limits. A local oilman named Leslie Miller grew suspicious enough to report what he'd seen to his state senator. That senator, John Kendrick, took the concern seriously and brought it straight to the United States Senate. In April of 1922, Kendrick formally introduced a resolution demanding answers about the mysterious new drilling leases. Almost immediately afterward, the Wall Street Journal published a front-page story blowing the secret leases wide open. The news spread fast. Rival oil companies were furious they'd never even been given the chance to bid. Congress, too, wanted answers. And for the very first time, Albert Fall's quiet scheme was suddenly under real scrutiny. President Harding, however, stood firmly behind his old friend, publicly defending the legality of the leases. He even sent a formal letter to the Senate personally endorsing Fall's decision to lease the reserves. Fall himself insisted the leases were entirely legal and had been negotiated purely to protect national security. For a while, that explanation seemed to work. Public outrage simmered, but nothing more happened right away. The Senate investigation crawled forward at an agonizingly slow pace, with few real answers and fewer consequences. Month after month passed with barely any progress, while Fall quietly continued running his department as usual. It seemed entirely possible that the whole affair might simply fade away, forgotten like so many scandals before it. Fall, for his part, appeared completely unbothered, confident that his secret would stay buried for good. In January of 1923, Albert Fall resigned from his position as Secretary of the Interior entirely. Officially, he simply wanted to retire and spend more time on his newly restored ranch in New Mexico. Unofficially, he was walking away from Washington with his fortune quietly intact and his secret still safe. He soon began new, lucrative business ventures overseas, working directly with both Sinclair and Doheny once again. From the outside, it looked exactly like a wealthy man simply enjoying a well-earned, comfortable retirement. For a little while longer, it genuinely seemed like Albert Fall had gotten away with everything completely clean. In the summer of 1923, President Harding set out on an ambitious tour across the western United States. Friends later said he seemed unusually anxious throughout the trip, weighed down by something he wouldn't discuss. In August, while staying in San Francisco, Harding suddenly collapsed and died of an apparent heart attack. His death shocked the nation and left the growing scandal hanging over an administration that could no longer defend itself. That October, the Senate finally launched formal public hearings into the entire Teapot Dome affair. Senator Thomas Walsh led the investigation, a quiet, methodical lawyer determined to follow the evidence wherever it led. Albert Fall was called as the very first witness, and he arrived looking calm, composed, and entirely confident. Under questioning, Fall insisted once again that every single lease had been negotiated fairly and legally. He claimed the secrecy itself had simply been necessary to protect sensitive matters of national security. For a while, his calm, confident testimony seemed to hold up reasonably well under the committee's questioning. But Senator Walsh kept quietly digging, following every financial thread back toward Fall's mysteriously improved fortune. It wouldn't take much longer before that thread led directly to a small, unassuming black leather bag. Investigators eventually traced the sudden improvements to Fall's ranch back to a very specific, very large sum of money. $100,000, delivered personally, in cash, with absolutely no paperwork attached to it at all. When confronted, Edward Doheny finally admitted, under oath, that he had personally sent Fall that exact amount. He still insisted it was simply a private loan between two old friends. Nothing more, nothing improper. Almost nobody on the committee believed that explanation for even a single second. In early 1924, special prosecutors were formally appointed to pursue the full truth, wherever it ultimately led. The government moved quickly to challenge the leases directly in court, arguing they had been built entirely on fraud. After a long legal battle, the courts agreed, and both leases were officially canceled and overturned completely. Sinclair and Doheny were ordered to pay significant fines and hand back the drilling rights they'd secretly obtained. But canceling the leases wasn't enough. Prosecutors also pursued criminal charges against all three men involved. Albert Fall was charged with accepting bribes. Sinclair and Doheny were charged with offering them in the first place. After years of delays, appeals, and legal maneuvering, the criminal trials finally began in earnest. In 1929, Albert Fall was finally found guilty of accepting bribes while serving as a sitting cabinet secretary. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison, becoming the very first cabinet member in American history to serve time. But in a bitter twist, Harry Sinclair and Edward Doheny were both acquitted of ever offering that same bribe. Under the law, somehow, it was proven that Fall had accepted money that, officially, no one had actually given him. Sinclair did eventually serve a short prison sentence, not for bribery, but for contempt of the Senate itself. In February of 1929, just before he was due to testify again, Edward Doheny,'s own son, was found dead. He had been shot by his longtime secretary in an apparent murder-suicide the night before their scheduled testimony. The man who took the bribe went to prison completely alone. The men who gave it walked entirely free. In American history, just like everywhere else, the system rarely seems to punish the people who profit the most.